Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
Speakers, publishers, consultants, coaches, and info marketers unite. The Speaking of Wealth Show is your roadmap to success and significance. Learn the latest tools, technologies, and tactics to get more bookings, sell more products, and attract more clients. If you're looking to increase your direct response sales, create a big-time personal brand, and become the go-to guru, the Speaking of Wealth Show is for you. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
Welcome to the Speaking of Wealth Show. This is your host, Jason Hartman, where we discuss profit strategies for speakers, publishers, authors, consultants, coaches, info marketers, and just go over a whole bunch of exciting things that you can use to increase your business, to make your business more successful and more passive and more automated and more scalable. So we will be back with a great interview. Be sure to visit us at speakingofwealth.com. You can take advantage of our blog, subscribe to the RSS feed, and many other resources for free at speakingofwealth.com. And we will be back with a great interview for you in less than 60 seconds. It's my pleasure to welcome Richard Zeoli to the show. He is the founder of RZC Impact, and he is the president of that organization as well. And he is the author of The 7 Principles of Public Speaking, Proven Methods from a PR Professional. And he is a weekday host on CBS Talk Radio, and it's a pleasure to have him here with us today. Rich, welcome. How are you?
Jason, I'm doing very well. Thanks so much for the invitation to be on your program.
Well, good. It's good to have you on the show. And let's talk about public speaking first. But there's no shortage of training on public speaking. I'm sure you'll agree. Lots of people have. Don't put your hands in your pockets. You know, all the kind of the basics out there.
Basics, yeah.
And I hope we're going to do a little more than that today. But I also definitely want to cover the area of media training, because a lot of authors, speakers, presenters, info marketers, they're out there doing media interviews. And some people really have zero training on that, and I think it's very important. So let's talk about the book first and public speaking skills, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you mentioned sort of jokingly about putting your hands in your pockets and some of the basics. For years, I was being hired by different political campaigns, mostly in the New Jersey, Philadelphia market, and then D.C. as well, to help politicians who were running for office. And then I started working with politicians who actually were elected to office. And it branched out into working with authors and business executives and entrepreneurs, and then just small business people, too, that also want to maximize the ability to give a good presentation. And through the course of the work, I was getting frustrated because people would ask me to recommend them a good public speaking book. And every public speaking book that I encountered was really focused on basic stuff, but it never got to the essence of what I think is a communications philosophy. And that's what I really tried to create here. And we published the book back in 2008, and it's still selling today, and it's still doing very well. And I've got another edition coming out soon. And basically that's because I think what I've done is create a program that's rooted in something deeper than just the gimmicks that most people are told when they're trying to learn public speaking.
Right. I think that's a great idea, Rich, because, you know, when you have the right philosophy, you know, I guess we could liken philosophy to the context from which one is presenting, right? And so when you have the right philosophy, everything stems out of that. So it's a great place to start. So what is your philosophy of public speaking?
Basically, the main philosophy, Jason, is stop trying to act like a great public speaker. You know, don't try to sound like a public speaker. I mean, so many people, when they're thinking of giving a presentation, they think they need to be someone that they're not, and they act like they're trying to speak to the masses in front of a auditorium. And many times they make mistakes by watching professional speakers who speak to large groups. And they go into it with the mindset of, okay, I'm speaking to a large group now, and I've got to put on my large group voice. And the essence of public speaking is, in my opinion, no different than if you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, and that's to have a conversation. And so I try to give people the advice of have a conversation with the audience, speak to each person individually. You don't speak to people in groups. Even though they're in a group, we listen as individuals. Every single person in a chair, no matter how big the size of the audience, whether it's 5 people or 5,000, each individual person hears as an individual, not as a member of a group. And so the more you can think of public speaking as less as public speaking and more on having a conversation with each individual person, the easier it becomes, because we have conversations every day, and also the more effective you'll be, and you'll be a lot more comfortable too, I should say. It really helps conquer nervousness as well.
Yeah, because when someone is trying to be something they're not, they're nervous that they're going to be discovered, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, so many times they're not authentic. They're not being their authentic self.
Yeah, being authentic is easy. There's nothing to be nervous about when you're just yourself. But how does that translate into some specifics? I mean, it sort of, and I don't want to take anything away from your philosophy because I know we're going to drill down on it, but it sort of sounds kind of basic. Be yourself, have a conversation. Are there some specific tactics that you can impart to speaking students?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first one is preparation. Preparation is so critical to giving a good presentation, and I can't emphasize enough how important that is when before you even begin speaking, to know what you want to say and to know what your message is and to really have it worked out. Because a lot of times anxiety comes from the fact that our mind is thinking of what to say because we don't know the content well enough, we don't know the information. And so more than anything I get asked is, how do I overcome public speaking anxiety? And the answer is always be prepared. And to that end, Jason, practice. Look at it this way. Think of professional athletes, right? I mean, these are guys who work out every day doing their craft, whether they're professional baseball players getting ready for spring training. They're paid millions of dollars for what they do a year, and they practice pretty much every single day. Now, for many of us, we make our living by speaking in one fashion or another, whether it's a presentation in front of a group, it's a sales pitch, it's leading people at work. How often, I would ask people, do you practice your communications? And for the most part, everybody says never. They just assume because they speak, that's the way it is. Well, if world-class athletes can practice their skill that they're paid millions of dollars to do every day, why can't you practice a little bit a couple times a week? And so to that end, I always tell people, if you've got to give a speech, if you've got a presentation coming up, if you've got a sales pitch coming up, practice it till it's inside and out. You know it inside and out. And that doesn't mean I want you to be a robot. I just want you to be prepared, because you're going to be a lot better at the presentation if you are.
Okay, so any advice on how to practice techniques? A lot of people say cue cards. That's rather old-fashioned, or not cue cards, but 3x5 cards. I guess those are cue cards in a way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're very effective. And, the nice thing is now everybody has an iPhone or a tablet that has a camera on it. And, the joke about doing selfies, I mean, don't do a selfie, but you could record yourself giving a presentation to an empty room. You could record yourself giving a speech and then listen back to it. That's a great way to practice. You could take a video of yourself on your iPhone in front of the room and see how you look on camera and how you're using your arms and your eye contact and all those other things. I mean, in the old days, I used to have to bring a camera everywhere I went to help people train. Nowadays, I just say, flip on your iPhone, record yourself, take a look at the video, watch it back, listen to how you sound, listen to the message, figuring out are you hitting people? And the way to hit people really is something that we call empathy. Are you empathizing with your audience, or are you speaking to them, or are you empathizing with them, understanding what they're looking for, what they need are, and then going from that frame of mind? It's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about some specific speakers that are well known in our culture. And the one that comes to mind is Mr. Obama. And before he was first elected, I actually used to think he was a great speaker. Of course, I thought Ronald Reagan was a great speaker too. I haven't thought any other presidents are except those two. But then after he was elected, I've become really unimpressed with Obama's speaking skills. Not from a political angle here, and I'm certainly unimpressed with that. But that's another subject.
You and me both.
Yeah. But we won't go there for this.
Americans, if you believe the latest polls.
That's true. That's true. But we won't go there necessarily. But talk to us about his speaking ability. I mean, he's great at reading a teleprompter, but as an actual speaker, I don't think he's very good. Do you? Or
no, he's not. He's not good on his feet, and that's the problem. Is he's not. And I think a big part of that comes from the fact that he doesn't really empathize well with people. He's not an empathetic person in that sense. When he's got a teleprompter, he's very good at it, but most people are. I mean, reading a teleprompter is a skill that I've trained people to do, believe it or not, but once you get it, it's like playing tennis or golf. I mean, you just get it. You know how to do it. It's not particularly complicated. But I'll give you a Democratic politician that was excellent at speaking, and that's Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, unlike Obama, could empathize with everybody, and he was very, very good at connecting with people one-on-one. It's one of the reasons why Clinton was such a successful communicator, much like Reagan, who also had the ability to empathize. When you heard these guys speak, you felt like they were talking directly to you as an individual, and that's a very powerful gift. With Obama, he's always speaking to the large crowd. He's always doing the large crowd thing. And it comes across looking like he doesn't know how to relate to the average person.
It's interesting because in the beginning, that's what everybody thought of, is he's the hope and change guy. He's the guy that's going to help the little guy. And it's certainly what you're saying. Bill Clinton is the I feel your pain guy. So empathy, I would totally agree with you there. But how did it change for Obama? What happened? Did his speaking style change that dramatically?
Well, I think a lot's changed for Obama. I mean, this was a guy who used to be against NSA spying on American citizens, but he used to be against the debt ceiling going up. A lot's changed for Obama, and that may be part of it too, which is that he may not believe a lot of the stuff he says. And there's an important lesson to be learned there. You have to really believe what you're saying, because people can tell if you are insincere. And I think a lot of the problem right now the president has is that he comes across very insincere and inauthentic. Now, believe me, there's always people that are going to say that I'm trying to be saying this from a political perspective of where I stand on the political spectrum. That's not the case.
But our listeners don't necessarily know that, by the way.
I just praise Bill Clinton for being a successful communicator. Obama is someone who when he speaks, Jason, I don't get a sense he really believes necessarily what he says. I think, and for someone listening to your show, Jason, I would say to them, the lesson here is you got to believe what you say. You have to mean what you say. And if you don't, if you're just saying things for the sake of saying them, people will see through it. And then at that point, you're done. You're going to lose that, what I call the credibility connection with your audience. And it is so vital to establish that connection.
And that's really what you were saying. Your first point was the authenticity, have a conversation, and stop thinking like you're a big public speaker. Okay, so very good points. Okay, what else?
Well, I think, and one of the things that I call the book the 7 Principles of Public Speaking for the reason that I go through each one as sort of an easy way to understand. One of the things I talk about in the book is the idea of visualization. I don't know if you ever use visualization in your life, but athletes do all the time. Athletes use visualization to help them become better athletes. And a lot more people in business are recognizing the power of visualization to succeed. And so what I always tell speakers is, if you have to give a speech, for example, say you're speaking at a hotel coming up, and you can go to the ballroom ahead of time and see the room and then picture the room, and then in your mind, close your eyes and visualize yourself in front of that group giving a presentation. Picture yourself giving a talk to people. Picture yourself communicating. Picture yourself looking people in the eyes. You will convince your mind, and this is very good to get yourself trained, your mind trained and prepared for that situation. So when it happens and you walk into the room, your mind goes, oh yeah, I get this. I know this. I'm okay with it. I'm good with it. It really cuts down the nervousness. But even if you're not someone who necessarily deals with anxiety as a speaker, every time you give yourself a competitive edge over anybody else, you win in life, right? So if you know that you've got to give a presentation somewhere, and you can go ahead of time and see the room and be there and be part of it.
Especially if you can stand up on the stage.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right.
Yeah. Because one thing, I've been surprised, and I think it's reduced my speaking quality at events where they're not events that I'm putting on, but I'm speaking at somebody else's event. And, I'll get up on the stage, and the sound reflects back, from the back of the room, and it comes back at me. And it sounds kind of weird. You have to get used to that. The lighting can really freak you out a bit as a speaker, the more of that you can see in advance and visualize success and just making it a great speech with a standing ovation, the better off you're going to be. So I couldn't agree more. That's a great tip. Okay, so a couple other principles, and maybe we can't cover all 7. They're certainly in the book, which is available on Amazon with 5-star reviews, I should mention. So great job there. But do you want to mention 1 or 2 other principles before we talk about media training?
Well, I will just say this. I mean, the power of storytelling is the most important principle of all. And, you talk about speakers a lot. I talk in the book about Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, who was one of the best communicators, I think, of recent times. And he was a great storyteller. And this is another thing where I think Obama really fails as a communicator. He's not very good at storytelling. The people that can tell a story and bring their listeners along on a journey, they're the ones who really succeed the most. And so think like a storyteller. And really, the best way to think like a storyteller is if you're an adult, you have kids, go back and read some of the children's books you used to read to your kids at night. Or when you're reading to your kids at night, pay attention. Every movie we watch, TV show, the good ones we like have good stories. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you can tell a story to your audience, relate to them through the power of storytelling, you will connect with them better than any other speaker that you can imagine, because that fundamentally is how we're taught. It's how we have evolved as communicators, through hearing stories told to us throughout our entire life.
The great tip, and I got to tell you, I think many people tell me that I'm a great public speaker, but I think I'm very weak on the storytelling, and I know that is a critical component. Do you have any advice? And of course, I'm asking with my own personal agenda. Sure. for how to be a better storyteller. I mean, should you study? And I've done it. Study Joseph Campbell's work in The Hero's Journey. There's a formula for stories, the way our mind wants to hear them. Right? Any tips you can give there would be personally appreciated.
Absolutely. Well, think about it. I mean, and as you with your successful radio show know, Jason, I mean, this is theater of the mind, and public speaking is no different. It's theater of the mind. So when you're talking to people and you're telling them something, they want to hear certain principles. Anticipation is a big one. Tension's a little bit. If you stand in front of an audience and you say, "I succeeded at this," that means nothing to people. But if you tell them how you succeeded, and you throw in some details about some struggles and some adversities, you throw in a little tension about a particularly troublesome day or a very tough decision you had to make, and you can make that tension come alive for them. If you visualization in terms of their minds, think in terms of your audience. Am I painting a picture for them that they'll be able to process and see? Am I giving them enough detail? And ultimately, am I doing this succinctly? Because the one thing that'll kill a story more than anything is a long story, a story that's too long. That doesn't, tell as long as it takes to tell the story is as long as the story should take. Get to the point is a big part. Exactly right. I mean, the example I'll give you is, we talk about the Gettysburg Address as one of the most famous speeches of all time. That speech was a little bit over a minute and a half. The governor of Maryland, who also spoke that day, spoke for over an hour and a half, and nobody even remembers his name. So too often speakers think they have to talk for a long time to connect with an audience, and that's not true. Mm-hmm. You can speak very powerfully in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm. What is the old saying? And I'm gonna mess this up, but it's be prepared, be present, and then be seated. Be brief and be seated.
Pretty much, that's it. That's right. Especially if you're the speaker before lunch is served.
Yeah, right. Everybody's waiting to get out of there. That's for sure.
That's right.
Yeah, great tips. Do you want to mention one more principle before we transition here?
Well, look, I'll just mention on the storytelling part of it, the story should always back up your message, and the message is key. What is the message of a speech? Just like good political leaders stay on message when they're giving a talk, a campaign speech, you as a speaker have to stay on message too. And you got to figure out what your message is. And then every story you tell should be to back up your message. Really, everything in your speech should be to help boost the message. If it doesn't help support your message, take it out. For example, a lot of times people ask me, should I try to put a joke in? Well, first of all, I don't know if you're funny, so I can't give you the answer to that. And B, if you tell a joke and it bombs, you got this big matzo ball hanging out there. So, a funny story is okay, but more than anything, you don't connect with audiences necessarily through humor. Because there's been a lot of comedians who've told jokes that don't necessarily connect with audiences. You connect with audiences by having a strong message that they can relate to. So what I would rather you spend your time doing is figuring out, does my speech relate to my audience? Am I empathizing with my audience? That is more than anything. And then once you figure out the message, stay on your message. Keep to your message and don't get distracted. You're there to give a speech by staying on message.
Excellent points. Well, as a big part of media training is trying to answer the questions and the talking points that we want to address in a media interview. So this is maybe a perfect segue to talking about media training, because it's moving some of that interview to discuss the talking points that we want to discuss, right? Rather than the interviewer's agenda necessarily. Would you say that's fair?
I think that's exactly right, Jason. I mean, you have to think about it in this respect. Most journalists have gone to school for this. They're professionals. They went to journalism school for the most part, and they've cut their teeth doing TV and radio and press their entire career. Now, you sit down in front of them, and you're a business person, you're a political candidate,
you're an amateur.
You're an amateur.
Right.
Yeah, and so what I always tell people is, why would you go into that situation unprepared? And for many people, they think, well, I have nothing that could hurt me. Well, it's not just about not being hurt. It's also about, can you maximize the opportunity? For example, I had a young woman who was basically asked to come on CNN to talk about, she was one of the heroes, a CNN heroes that was named for great contributions to helping people in life. And she was going on Larry King, and I thought, well, this is a great opportunity for you to hit the ball out of the park and to really nail it, to really kind of maximize the opportunity. But you got to be ready for it, because Larry King certainly is ready for it. And so we worked together on the concept of seizing that 90 seconds to make it count by telling your story, knowing your message, knowing what it is you want to say, knowing how you want to say it properly, and then practicing. Just like you wouldn't go into any situation in business unprepared, I would always encourage you, use that media training opportunity as a gift, really, to promote your business, your career, whatever it is, and then seize on it.
How do you handle tough questions? Questions maybe that, if it's a controversial subject and maybe you don't want to go there. But this applies especially with your background in politics, of course, because I remember one media training program I was studying many years ago. It said the interviewer asks you a question and then you answer your own question, which sounds like what politicians pretty much do.
Well, that's exactly right. You have to remember something. The press are not your friend. The media is there not to be your friend. They're professionals. They have a job to do, and you have to respect that job, and you should do it accordingly. When you know your message, your job during that interview is to stay on message, and it's not to be taken off message. So if they ask you something that's unrelated to what you're there to talk about, you've got to find a way to bring it back to what it is you're there to talk about. And, you could be a baby about it and say, well, that's not why you brought me on your show. Okay, you could do that, but you're never going to be asked back. Or you can find a way to say, well, that's an interesting question. In my experience, as a boom, and then take it back to where you were. But again, Jason, it's like anything else. It requires practice, it requires training, and it requires you being, committed to the fact that you have a message to share, and you're going to stay on that message no matter what comes your way.
Yeah, very good, very good. And any things in terms of how many talking points one can have? Well, of course, it depends how long the interview is, but, I just sort of think we can only sort of hold 3 ideas generally, whether the interview be really long and it's sort of 3 15-minute segments, or if the interview is 3 minutes and it's 3 1-minute points. But I may be totally wrong about that.
No, I don't think you're totally wrong about that. I think you're exactly right. 3 is a great number. I mean, we hear in threes, we talk in threes, and baseball is 3, outs and you're done. It's a good way to think about things. And so going back to the story thing, for example, have 3 stories to tell in your life, about your business, about your successes. Have 3 stories in your pocket you can bring out at any time, any moment that you can share with somebody. Have 3 stories of adversity that you can share at any moment. Have 3 stories of what you'd like to accomplish, because, goals can also be told in the form of a story as well. If you have those things with you at all times, and then you have your message boiled down to 3 fundamental points. What are the 3 main points of my message that I want to get across? And you have those with you in your mind, and you've trained, you practiced, you prepared, you know the messages inside and out. You won't have a moment where you're standing up there and saying the first 2 and then you can't remember the third, and you have an oops moment like Rick Perry did one time. But 3 is a good way to do it. But then again, don't, if it's 5, if it has to be 5, fine. If it only has to be 2, that's okay too. Every person's going to be different in that sense. The key is what you're saying vital to your message? Does it back up your message in some way? Does it support your message? Is it important enough to communicate? Because if it isn't, why are you saying it, would be my point.
Very good stuff. Maybe one final area I'd like to ask you about, Rich, and that is the concept of likability. And this is not an easy one, but do you have any tips on that? Because even if someone isn't a great speaker, even if someone doesn't do a great interview, when we're talking about the media training side, but just people like people who are like them. Likability wins the day. Humor certainly helps, but I don't know. It seems like there are certain people that are really unnatural when it comes to humor, and the rest of us just aren't, and I'm one of those. But, any tips on likability?
Yeah, I mean, the people like people who are likable, and likability means that you like other people. If I'm sure, Jason, you probably have read Dale Carnegie and his work.
Sure. Took his course.
How to win friends and influence people. The concept of basically having a genuine interest in other people is something you can't fake. You either have it or you don't. But the nice thing is we can all learn to appreciate our fellow human beings more. We can all learn to appreciate our colleagues more.
Right.
And you become a likable person by showing an interest in other people. A genuine interest in other people, not a phony one.
No question.
A genuine interest.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to have an interest in other people because you don't think that person can help you ever in life, I'm sure you can find stories, and I can share my own, of people who at one point were someone that answered to me who are now in positions to help me in life.
Right.
So there's no shortage of stories like that are out there. There's no excuse for you not taking the time to get to know a person who works with you, to get to know a person. If you go from the mindset of, well, I don't need this person, what can they do for me? You're going to find yourself hitting a lot of roadblocks in life, I think.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it reminds me when I originally read as a teenager How to Win Friends and Influence People, of the story about the couple that was leaving someone's home for dinner, and they heard the other couple inside the house say, "What an interesting couple! How engaging they were, how interesting they were," and they realized that they didn't say anything; they just asked a lot of questions. So
yeah,
it's
so true.
Don't talk about yourself, talk about the other person. But the question is, how do you do that, Rich? That's great interpersonal communication advice, no question about it. I completely agree. But how do you do it from the platform or on a media interview when it's a one-to-many type of communication?
Yeah, well, again, if you go from the concept of speaking directly to one person, for example, if you're on Fox News tonight, don't think about it that you're communicating via the camera to millions of people. Think about it that through that camera is one person sitting there watching television, and you're talking directly to that one person. It's the same thing with radio. People don't listen in large groups. They don't watch TV in large groups. And even when we're sitting in a large group together, listening is still a very, very intimate experience. Every single person listens individually. Listening is an intimate experience. And so when you can talk to someone intimately, one-on-one, and you don't think about the masses, but you think of that one person sitting in front of the TV, or that one person with the radio on, or that one person who's sitting in a chair in the audience, and you talk directly to that person, that's the key. Now, I can't just simply tell you, well, do this, Jason, and that's how you achieve it, because it's not as simple as that. It's a mindset, and it's changing the mindset from thinking in terms of speaking to the masses, and then to that mindset of, as I talk about in the 7 Principles of Public Speaking, the very basic core principle, which is speak one-on-one and have a conversation. It's tricky, but when you get it, when you become good at it, not only do you become a more relaxed speaker, you become a speaker that people really like listening to, and that makes your job as a speaker easier. It also makes you more sought after speaker. And when I speak to groups and people come up to me at the end and say, I want to thank you for speaking. It felt like you were talking directly to me.
That's a great.
It felt like you understood. That's the best compliment I can ever get in life.
Fantastic. Great advice. Well, Rich, give out your website if you would. And, of course, the book is available on Amazon. Excellent 5-star reviews there. But give out your website.
Sure. My website is rzcimpact.com. rzcimpact.com. The book is the 7 Principles of Public Speaking, and there's also an audio edition of the 7 Principles of Public Speaking in which I basically go through the training course and I speak. So if you don't like to read, you can always do it that way, which is my preferred approach, by the way, I should add.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of audiobooks too, because you can get there's so much more really information that you're receiving. Earl Nightingale told me so many years ago that you get the speaker's emotion and you just pick up on a lot more. And of course, it's portable. You can be walking the dog and
right.
in the car. So it makes your car a rolling university. That's fantastic advice. Well, Richard Zeoli, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing some fantastic tips on public speaking, interpersonal communications, and media training. All very, very important. Appreciate having you on the show.
It was my pleasure, Jason. Thanks so much.
What's great about the shows you'll find on jasonhartman.com is that if you want to learn how to finance your next big real estate deal, there's a show for that. If you want to learn more about food storage and the best way to keep those onions from smelling up everything else, there's a show for that. If you honestly want to know more about business ethics, there's a show for that. And if you just want to get away from it all and need to know something about world travel, there's even a show for that. Yep, there's a show for just about anything. Only from jasonhartman.com, or type in Jason Hartman in the iTunes Store.
This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company, all rights reserved. For distribution or publication rights and media interviews, please visit www.hartmanmedia.com or email media@hartmanmedia.com. Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and the host is acting on behalf of Platinum Properties Investor Network, Inc. exclusively.